At this point, we proceed to the annual conferring of the award of Honorary Doctorate of RCSI. RCSI established an annual Honorary Doctorate Award in 2011 to recognise excellence and to provide an inspiration to you, our students, on your graduation day. The awardees are exceptional people who've made a difference in the world through education, research or service. Previous awardees include President Mary McAleese, Father Michael Kelly, a Zambian citizen, an educationalist, an internationally renowned expert in HIV/AIDS, the Right Honourable Professor the Lord Ara Darzi, graduate and surgical innovator. We, as RCSI staff, believe that you, our graduates today, will also make a difference for good in the world. And we want, through sharing their stories and their words, to inspire and to challenge you on this special day to make a difference. I now call on the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences of RCSI, Professor Hannah McGee, to introduce the 2014 Honorary Doctorate awardee.
President of RCSI, Chancellor NUI, Pro-President of RCPI, graduates, our colleagues and guests. It is with great pleasure that I introduce you to our candidate for the RCSI 2014 Honorary Doctorate Award, Professor Abraham Verghese, the Linda R. Meyer and Joan F. Lane Provostial Professor and Vice Chair for the Theory and Practice of Medicine at the School of Medicine at Stanford University, USA. Professor Verghese is an acclaimed, best-selling author and physician with an international reputation for his focus on healing and the human side of medicine, in an era where the fascination with technology is in danger of overwhelming the primacy of the individual in the healthcare setting. Born in Addis Ababa in 1955, Professor Verghese completed his medical training in India and then left for a medical residency in the US. Like many international medical graduates, he initially found only the less popular hospitals and communities open to him and his career, an experience he described in one of his early New Yorker articles called The Cowpath to America. But, as his career importantly demonstrates, it's not where you start, indeed it's not where you finish, it's what you make of your career opportunities that counts. In Johnson City, Tennessee, early in his career, he saw the emergence of the HIV epidemic, with the doubly challenging stigma of HIV and AIDS in a very rural community. His caring for terminal AIDS patients and the insights he gained from the deep relationships he formed then and the suffering he witnessed were intensely transformative, as described by him in his first book called My Own Country, A Doctor's Story. Professor Verghese then moved and became founding director of the Center for Medical Humanities and Ethics at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio, there highlighting empathy for patient suffering that had been honed by his own experiences. There he also became more focused on bedside medicine, combining the value he placed on the physical examination in diagnosing patients with the value of attentiveness to the patients and their families, and seeing both these characteristics as complementary and vital aspects of the healing process. This deep interest in bedside medicine and his reputation as a clinician, teacher and writer led ultimately to his appointment in 2007 by Stanford University School of Medicine. In his writing and in his work, Professor Verghese continues to emphasize the importance of bedside medicine and physical examination in an area of advanced medical technology. His very popular novel called Cutting for Stone, published in 2009, addresses the issue, and if I quote, I wanted the reader to see how entering medicine was a passionate quest, a romantic pursuit, a spiritual calling, a privileged yet hazardous undertaking. It's a view of medicine I don't think too many young people see in the West because, frankly, in the sterile hallways of modern medical industrial complexes where physicians and nurses are hunkered down behind computer monitors and patients are whisked off here and there for all manner of tests, that side of medicine gets lost. When I say very popular novel, Professor Verghese, we learned this week in trying to purchase some extra copies of your book that it's the best-selling book for book clubs in Ireland. And that's quite a feat considering how in Ireland we like to write books and we also like to join book clubs. So we do mean very popular novel when we say it. In terms of curriculum development, his work at Stanford School of Medicine is widely known. He has established the Stanford 25, a set of 25 core physical examination skills to recognize the basic phenotypic expressions of disease that can manifest as abnormal physical signs. We have studied this with great interest in our own current curriculum renewal work. Professor Verghese is widely published in the academic medical literature as well as popular fiction and has received many accolades. He's a member of the Institute of Medicine, the National Academy of Sciences. He was made a Master of the American College of Physicians in 2005 and wore the John P. McGovern Medal of the Osler Society of Montreal in 2007, to mention but a few. If I link this then to RCSI, our motto from our foundation year in 1784 is Concilio Manique, with scholarship and dexterity. So with the head and the hand. And so, Professor Abraham Verghese, your values concerning the practice of medicine and your skilled communication of these to a wider public as well as professional audience are values that align with our foundation motto of 1784. We felt that your achievements were particularly suited to our annual single award of an honorary doctorate. And we felt that they would bring inspiration to our graduates here today in 2014 on their special day. And so we were particularly pleased when you almost instantly expressed your agreement to our invitation to accept this graduation. And so we are delighted that you have accepted the highest academic honour of the RCSI Honorary Doctorate. And I'm calling now on the President of the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland to make the award and to invite you to sign the Roll of Honour.
By virtue of my office of President, it gives me great pleasure to award you the 4th Honorary Doctorate of the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland.
And so it's my pleasure to invite you as 2014 RCSI Honorary Doctorate, Professor Abraham Verghese, to address our graduates, our staff, and our guests.
Distinguished platform party, distinguished guests, and most of all, members of the class of 2014. I feel so privileged to be receiving this honorary doctorate from the Royal College of Surgeons of Ireland. And it's humbling to join the ranks of the 3 very distinguished people who have received this award before I did. I want to thank Dr. Dean McGee for that very generous introduction. And I also thank you, President McGee of the College of Surgeons, for that presentation and for this great, great honor. I'd also like to especially thank Professor Cathal Kelly and his staff for the wonderful way they've made us feel so very welcome in Dublin. Thank you so much for that. I'm most grateful. Graduates of the class of 2014, congratulations. Rituals, whatever ritual you choose to think about, baptism, marriage, rituals are all about transformation. They're all about the crossing of a threshold. And this ritual, with all its tradition, with all its ceremony, with all its pomp and circumstance, is about your crossing a very special threshold. It's about your joining us as colleagues in what is not a job, not a trade, but a calling, a ministry. This ritual is to signify the privilege that you will now be accorded in society, the privilege of entering lives at their most vulnerable moment, the privilege of hearing things that most people will not tell their spouses or their preachers, but they will tell you. the privilege of having someone that you've just met disrobe and allow touch, which in any other context in society would be assault. But because it's you, it's part of your job. It's a privilege. I am first and foremost a practicing physician. Any writing I have done has been shaped by the privilege of being in patients' lives and being allowed to witness their trajectory, their trials, their struggles. And in being witness to their stories, I've learned so much. And I wanted to share with you today two of the many stories that have stuck with me, that have shaped me. And my great hope is that they might shape you as well. Stories, by the way, are integral to medicine. If you think about it, when you take a history, what do? But you get a story. In fact, the word story is embedded in that word history. I think of stories as instructions for living, and I'd like to share with you just two that have stayed with me and that I hope will linger with you. The first has to do with my time in Tennessee when I was a young physician taking care of patients with HIV in the mid-'80s. This was a time when I first understood the difference between healing and curing. I think I was a physician all caught up in the conceit of cure. I was an infectious disease specialist looking to cure people, and along came this incurable disease landing in the laps of those of us who decided to specialize in infectious diseases. And it was a very tough time, as you can imagine, before we had any medications. I was taking care of patients who were my age at the time, about in their 30s, and they were all dying. And I understood the lesson, the difference between healing and curing from that experience. I remember one morning I was in clinic, and as I looked at my clinic roster, I saw that I was about to see a young man who I'd really come to like, because you get to know your patients very well when they're on this tragic journey. And just as I saw his name, the phone rang, and it was his mother calling to say that my patient was too weak to come to the clinic. And yet he wasn't ill enough to be in the hospital, but he was too weak to come to the clinic. And I suddenly realized that if I didn't do something different, I might never see this young man who I was quite fond of. I might never see him again. And so that afternoon, when clinic was over, I decided for my own needs, for my own purposes, to drive out to where he lived in the countryside, about a half-an-hour drive, to see him, because it just didn't sit well with me, the idea that I might not see him again otherwise. And when I got to his house, to his trailer, to my great surprise, my visit had a profound effect on the family and on him. Even though I had gone there for my purposes, my visit seemed to convey to him that I would not abandon him, that I would be there with him. My visit seemed to help the family come to terms with the illness. In an extraordinary way, my visit had done much more than I had expected. And as I was driving away that day, leaving the house, I thought, this is what the horse and buggy doctor of 150 years ago did so powerfully. In the absence of all the things that you and I take for granted, before diphtheria, tetanus toxins, and all the sort of preventive things that are standard now, before antibiotics, before the advances in surgery, physicians were able to heal even when they could not cure. And I'm going to use an analogy to make that distinction clear to you. I want you to imagine for me, if you would, leaving this wonderful event and going to your houses, your apartments, and as you walk to your door, you realize that the door is open even though you had locked it. And as you look, you realize that the lock is in splinters. And then when you walk inside, you find that everything's strewn around and all your valuables are gone. Your jewelry, your computers, your television, your iPod, God forbid, with your lifetime collection of music is also gone. Everything you value. You will be devastated because of this physical loss of stuff. But in addition, you'll have a second sense of loss, a sense of violation, that someone came into your house and violated your sacred space when you were gone, quite apart from all the things they took. And if the police come by in an hour and say, we found the person who did this, we've got all your stuff back, here it is, at that moment you will be cured, but you will not be healed. Your sense of violation will linger. You might even move from that apartment because of a sense that the sanctity of this has been broken in some way. Well, I submit to you, graduates of the class of 2014, that all illness has those two qualities. There's always a physical sense of loss, whether it's cancer or losing a finger or breaking a leg. But there's also always a sense of spiritual violation, a sense of why me, why now? And in those instances where we can't do anything about the physical loss, there is still so much you can do about the sense of spiritual violation, especially in diseases like cancer and diseases like HIV. By your presence, by the great privilege of carrying that prefix before your name that says you are a physician, you are Dr. so-and-so. The second anecdote I want to share with you also has to do from that era, from the era in HIV when we did not have the medications we have now, and when our job was to preside over the decline and dwindling of our patients and watch them die. It was a very formative time for many of us of that generation. And I remember one young man who had been admitted to the hospital. He was wasting away, he was not getting any better, and even though we could try to treat his pneumonia, treat this, treat that, he was generally on the decline. There was very little we could do. And every day I would go by his hospital room, and his mother was always there, always at his bedside. And I would say a few words to her, and then I would turn to him, try to talk to him, but his consciousness kept coming and going. And then, out of a sense of impotence, out of not knowing quite what else to do, I would examine him. I would listen to his heart, I would percuss his lungs, I would listen to his chest, I would palpate his abdomen, even though there was nothing new I was going to discover in that would change the trajectory of his illness. And on what turned out to be the last day of his life, when I came by, his mother told me that he hadn't moved or interacted with her for the last 16 hours or so. And as I stood talking to her, I then turned to him and I called his name, and it seemed as though he became aware of my presence. And to his mother's astonishment and mine, we saw his hands start to rise up. And as we were wondering, what are his hands doing? His hands came up and they descended on his wasted chest, his wicker basket chest, all the ribs sticking out. And I suddenly realized that he was trying to undo his pajama buttons for me. He was inviting me to examine him. And I realized that this ritual, which I had engaged in at the bedside, which was so meaningful to me because it gave me some sense of purpose, had also been terribly important to him. It was a ritual that he valued. And there he was on the last day of his life, giving me an invitation to invite him again. It was an invitation I did not decline. I percussed, I auscultated, I felt the belly. And I think I learned that day that something about the exam transcends the diagnostic information that you will obtain. And that exam, especially in that setting, says, I will not abandon you, I will be with you to the end. Graduates of the class of 2014, I want you to humor me for just a second, if you would. I want you to take a look at your dominant hand. I presume you have one. Take a look at your hand with me, if you would. Your hand, looking the way it does, is a direct result of the evolution of our human brain. Your hand is, in a sense, the way your brain interacts with the world. Don't worry, I'm not about to ask you about the ulnar nerve and the blood supply and whether it supplies the adductor muscle or not. Your hand is the tool through which magnificent buildings like this have come about. Your hands like this, are the tools by which lasers have excised tumors, the tools by which rockets have traveled to the moon. But I just want you to look at your hand and remember one thing, that in this era of proteomics and genomics and all the wonderful advances that are to come, only your hand is being given the privilege that very few other hands have, to touch where it hurts, to rest a hand on the shoulder of a grieving family, to bring comfort, to reassure. I hope that you will always, in moments of quiet, in moments of reflection, And for me, it's the moment when I wash my hands and enter the room. I'm always conscious that I'm about to enter sacred space and that I have in my hand, literally, one of the most powerful tools of medicine and the great privilege of being allowed to use it. I want to close by reading you a letter that's not mine. I think it's fitting that I should end with words that are not mine, but words that are from the patients that you and I serve. This was a letter that was sent to me by a mother whose son had died of AIDS. And her son had written this letter to her and arranged for her to get it 1 month after he died, because he thought by then she would be ready to hear the message that was in this letter. And I want to read this particularly because his message is a lot about family, and I'm very conscious today that so many of you would not be here without your parents' support, without your spouse's support, your partner's support, your sibling's support. So before I read this letter, may I just take the liberty of asking the parents, the brothers and sisters, the relatives of the graduates to please stand and acknowledge our applause for taking our graduates through this wonderful many, many years. Please stand. On behalf of the class of 2014, thank you. Thank you. So here goes. Here's the letter from son to mother after his death. And he seems to say so much better than I'm struggling to say the things that are important in life. And so I'm going to conclude by reading this letter to you. Dear Mom, this last part of my life could have been very unpleasant. But it wasn't. In fact, Mother, in many ways, this has been the best part of my life, because I've had the opportunity to get to know my family again, a chance very few people have, and even fewer take advantage of. Mother, I've enjoyed a life full of adventure and travel, and I loved every instant of it, but I probably never would have slowed down enough to really appreciate all of you if it hadn't been for this terrible illness. That's the silver lining in this very, very dark cloud. Mother, I've had so full and satisfying a life that it seems almost tacky for me to express any regrets. Nevertheless, there are some things I wish I could have done. Number one, I'd like to have been mayor of Key West. And he goes on with a wonderful laundry list of things that he would have liked to do, which I'm not going to read to you. And then he says, but when you get right down to it, Mother, I would have to live several hundred years to fulfill all the dreams that I had. I've done pretty well with the time allotted to me, and so I have no regrets. I feel sorry for people who die at whatever age, who haven't had the chance in life to fulfill some of their dreams as I've had. That, Mother, is the real tragedy. Mom, if anyone ever asks you if I went to heaven, tell them this: I just came from there. No place could conceivably be as wonderful as where I've spent these last 39 years. I'll miss it. I'll miss you, Mother. I'm so glad we made good use of this time to get to know each other again. Graduates of the class of 2014, make good use of your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.